Let's spend Thursday afternoon together and let's go straight over to my first guest. She is Talk's excellent international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Good afternoon, Isabel.
Good afternoon, Kev.
Before we get into everything I laid out in my monologue, I need to talk to you about the latest nonsense on the migrant crisis front. This is just broken, so I'd be interested to get your take on it. The COVID inquiry, that thing that's costing us about £175,000 every day while not inquiring into what we all need to find out about. Did the lockdowns work? They're not even considering that question because the answer is they didn't. But the COVID inquiry seems to think that it's a given that lockdowns are brilliant. They're not. But that's what the COVID inquiry has pre-decided, even though we're spending all that money to look into it. No question of examining whether or not lockdowns were worth it. They were a disaster. They were a catastrophe. We must never do it again. COVID inquiry, not looking into that. Anyway, Isabel, here's the deal. Chaos. COVID inquiry has just produced its initial report saying that chaos at the heart of Boris Johnson's government and a failure to take COVID-19 seriously cost 23,000 lives in the first wave of the pandemic. Now, I'd say two things about that. First of all, how do they quantify 23,000 lives? My feeling is this is a left-leaning inquiry that loves lockdowns and was always going to have a go at a Tory government. I don't think there's any doubt that Boris's government was pretty chaotic in its stewardship of the COVID pandemic, of the crisis, if you like. But I'm not entirely trusting of this inquiry. I think they were always going to say this. How do you think they came up with this 23,000 lives? Seems like a very round number, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I share your scepticism, Kev. I mean, I actually, having sort of been on the inside of this story, having worked on the Pandemic Diaries book, which is based on evidence from Matt Hancock and all those WhatsApp messages that I read, I'm not actually sure it's fair to say that in the beginning stages of the pandemic, there was any more chaos than might have been expected. You know, this was a first time anything like this had ever happened. And in fact, in fairness to the then health secretary, he had been taking this virus pretty seriously from the very beginning of the year. You know, you'll remember that we went into lockdown at the end of March, didn't we? And the government, of course, they didn't want to rush into any kind of lockdown. I mean, this whole inquiry seems to have started from the premise that more lockdowns would have been a good thing. Whereas I'm coming from precisely the opposite premise, that lockdowns are absolutely the last resort. And, you know, I feel the first lockdown was in some ways justifiable or even potentially necessary, whilst the experts, the medics, the scientists worked out what was this thing that we were dealing with. I find it very hard to believe that if the whole nation had kind of juddered to a halt at the beginning of March, somehow that would have prevented this thing ever kind of felling as many people as it tragically did, because ultimately it's a sort of false premise to try to keep a respiratory virus at bay just by keeping everyone inside indefinitely.
Absolutely, and I just got some more information. Unsurprisingly, the COVID inquiry has concluded that the government response to the pandemic in March 2020, as you just relayed, was too little too late. This whole inquiry has been based on trying to decide whether or not we should have locked down much earlier, or whether, and just whether or not we should have locked down for much longer, more and more lockdowns. What we want to know, I'm just watching Baroness Hallett, the chairwoman of the Baroness Hallett of the chairwoman of the inquiry, pontificating. I've got a message for you. Can you stop wasting our time and stop? I'm looking at her on the telly now. I'm shouting at her. I don't know why. It's really a pointless thing to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. Stop wasting our time and stop wasting our money, you old windbag. Seriously, it's all based around, predicated debated on, did we lock down early enough and did we lock down long enough? And of course, the conclusion is too little, too late. And as I say, had we, look, listen to this, had we only have imposed a lockdown 1 week earlier than we did, we could have saved 23,000 lives in England. What a handy round number that is. This is really annoying. 175 grand a day for this claptrap, this politically charged claptrap.
I mean, I've been very opposed to the whole way that the COVID inquiry has been set up. It's frankly ludicrous that only now, almost 6 years after the event, are we getting the earliest conclusions of this ridiculously protracted and unbelievably over-expensive investigation. You know, most people have kind of just about got ready to move on from the pandemic at this point. I mean, I consider myself someone who was almost obsessive about the impact of lockdowns and the minutiae of the pandemic. But even I now am beginning to think, really, you know, are we really going to be going over this all right now? I would have loved to have heard these all these evidence sessions many, many years ago. The whole thing, when you look at the remit of the COVID inquiry, it's absolutely gargantuan. They've tried to cover almost every angle you could possibly conceive of, apart from the very one.
Yeah, exactly. Apart from the one question we want answered. Should we lock down at all? And in fact, I can answer that question, and so can you, Isabel. The answer is no. We must never do that again. Look at the mess. We are still in a massive mess, economically, socially, culturally, because of the lockdowns. We have never recovered. And this inquiry that will only consider whether or not we should have locked down earlier or longer, it's an insult to our intelligence.
It is. The other thing that I really think is still pertinent is the issue of whether every adult should have been put under such unbelievable pressure to have a vaccine that we subsequently discovered didn't actually help prevent transmission between patients. And I still don't.
Or prevent you catching it. It was the world. It was the world's. It remains the world's worst ever virus. Vaccine doesn't stop you catching the virus. Doesn't stop you passing it on. Doesn't stop anything. They just vaguely said, "Well, we reckon maybe you probably won't die if you have it." Well, I don't know how they quantify that. And the fact they're still doling this vaccine out to millions of people. Some people have had this vaccine, like 20, 30, 40 times. That's ridiculous. Old people in particular, every 3 months, have another vaccine. But it doesn't work. It's ridiculous.
I also think it was absolutely unethical. We were put under so much pressure. It was like a kind of emotional blackmail. Do you remember all those horrific pictures of, supposedly dying grannies? And, very elderly, vulnerable people did die of or with COVID. No doubt about that. Just as very elderly people die of pneumonia and flu every year. COVID was very dangerous for very elderly and fragile people. COVID was not dangerous for young people. COVID should never have been allowed to ruin the lives of so many children, to ruin the student experiences of tens of thousands of undergraduates who are forced to pay their full tuition fees and be locked and corralled into their halls of residence, never to have a proper student experience. COVID should never have been imposed on in the way it was on our children, so that they were made to feel like they were little vectors of the disease and they were shut out of their schools. More children died of being beaten up in their own homes during lockdowns than died of COVID, healthy children.
Is that right? I mean, that does sum up the awfulness of what went on. It was all wrong. It was all wrong. We must never, ever do it again. This inquiry will not only conclude that we must do it again in the event of a pandemic, but we must do it stronger and harder and be even more draconian with the people than we were the last time. And we, the people, must rail against that. We can't let these... Well, you know more about this than anyone because you saw all the WhatsApp messages between these panicking, clueless government ministers who were parading themselves as great protectors of the community when behind closed doors they had no idea what they were doing. We can't let this happen again. Well, let's yeah, we've got time now. Let's just drop that, and maybe everybody would like to give us a call and let us know what you think about this initial conclusions of the COVID inquiry, that the government did not respond early enough or strongly enough. In other words, they wanted us to lock down a lot earlier than we did and a lot longer than we did, and they still won't give us an answer about whether or not lockdowns are a good idea at all. I can give you the answer. They're a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. I tell you what, Isabel, let's go to break now, but when we come back, I want to talk to you about Shabana Mahmood's latest hardline idea about what to do about illegal migrants. She wants to, at the moment, ridiculously, we give these people £3,000 to try and persuade them to leave and return to their home country. Hard line, tough as old boots, hard line, hard as nails. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood wants to raise that significantly, maybe to 10 grand or something. That's not very hard line, is it? We'll talk about that after the break. Stay where you are. Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. We've just been covering this breaking news that the COVID inquiry, the £175,000 a day COVID inquiry that has been trundling on for years and probably will trundle on for many, many years to come without telling us whether or not we should have locked down. They think that was oh, no, of course, locking down. That was always a good thing to do. Trouble is we didn't do it early enough or long enough. So next time we have a pandemic, we can really, really lock down for like ever and then ruin the country forever. Honestly, drives me nuts. 23,000 lives were lost in the first wave of the pandemic because the government was in chaos and did too little, too late. How do they know? Where do they get 23,000 from? Nice round number, isn't it? It wasn't 22,999 or 23,001. It was 23,000. Make of that what you will. Isabel, let's talk about Shabana Mahmood. First of all, I just want to reiterate all of her hardline proposals, all these Westminster twonks reeling back. Oh, she's the new Nigel Farage. Oh, she should be in reform. These are so tough. None of her measures are going to work, because every single asylum seeker that she says you can't bring your family over will go to the European Court of Human Rights and win their case. Every single migrant she tries to take the jewellery off when they arrive will go to the ECHR and win the case. And the idea that every 30 months we will review whether or not their countries are actually at war is for the birds. So none of this is going to work. None of this is going to work. Today we learn that hardline, tough as old boots, Shabana Mahmood is now proposing to persuade these asylum seekers, these illegal migrants, people who broke into our country illegally, currently, bizarrely, I think, in order to persuade them to go back to their own countries, we're giving them £3,000, bribing them with 3 grand. Shabana's hardline plan is to up the ante. You know, she hasn't decided on a figure, but she wants to do it substantially, so we'll end up getting them 10 grand or something like that. Why don't we just kick them out? They're illegal. You know, do what Donald Trump does. Your presence here is unlawful. You're out. No money. Just kick them out. Why can't we do that?
Well, I think it's completely unacceptable. And just to put those figures in some sort of context, £3,000 is way more than the average annual earnings in Sudan or Eritrea. So that is a bit like giving a British person, I don't know, 40 grand, 35 grand.
Yeah.
After they've broken the law. Let's suppose you or I rocked up in Eritrea, and you know, we bust into the country, and they very nicely put us in the best of their hotels that they could come up with, and fed us and watered us and gave us medical attention. And then the Eritrean government said, hey, you know, never mind that you broke in and we've been treating you in a really nice way. Would you like 30, 35 grand, 40 grand to go home? Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take the money. but also, like some of these enterprising migrants are already doing, I think I'd come back again. Yeah. Let's do a loop around and see how many times we can go.
Like a one in, one out system kind of thing. I mean, she's given an interview saying, I know that they're paying migrants to go back to their, illegal migrants to go back to their home countries sticks in people's craw. Damn right it does, Shabana. It sticks in my craw to the extent that I don't want you to give them a damn penny. Stop all this madness. And today we learn to prove just how bad this crisis is. It's get out of control now, Isabel. 500 more foreign nationals are signing on for universal credit every single day. 500 more.
That is just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is just beggars belief. How the hell did our political leaderships lose control to that extent? You know, this is completely unsustainable. And, you know, we've got this budget from hell coming up next week. And this is also around about the time that many of us are having to pay their tax bills, fill out your horrible self-assessment or pay your corporation tax.
Tell me about it.
You're due. Just done mine, Kev, a horrible amount of Great British taxes. The thought that, you know, that might be going to bribe illegal immigrants to go home really makes me feel quite sick. And I'm sure it will make many of our listeners feel sick if they think that that's what they are working to pay for. I think this is going to get, you know, the temperature in our country is already maybe freezing outside, but in the national mood, I think, is at boiling point already. And if people start being given ever higher sums to leave, I think that is just going to push some people over the edge. Now, what does that look like? I don't know. But there's going to be, I don't know whether people are going to go on strike or they're going to organise more peaceful protests or what it is. But I know that people want a way to express just that they're just not prepared to put up with this anymore.
Yeah, just to put some numbers on it, so as 500 more migrants, foreign nationals, sign up for universal credit every day, that has brought the number of foreign nationals that we're paying benefits to, big benefits to 1.3 million. That's up from about 885,000 last year. So it's soaring. It is soaring. You know, Stella Creasy, the left-wing Labour backbencher, called Shabana Mahmood's tough new migrant crisis measures performative cruelty. I call them performative headline hunting because they're not going to amount to a hill of beans. What's she doing about this? Well, where is the proposal to stop the boats? Where is the proposal to find out anything about these people, these predominantly young men, thousands and thousands of them that we let in every month? Well, you know, these proposals, they sound all right, but as long as we stay in the ECHR, they cannot be imposed. They cannot be instigated. It is as simple as that. So all we've had from Shabana Mahmood over this week is a lot of talk and babble that won't amount to a hill of beans, I'm afraid. Meanwhile, look at the number. 1.3 million foreign nationals claiming universal credit, and that number is going up by 500 a day. So they come here, they break into our country, and we give them a load of money. This is madness.
You know, a lot of this money is also getting sent out of Britain. It's not even,
yes, it's back to their families.
It's not even as if it's sloshing around our own economy.
Oh,
you know,
God.
It's leaving the country. You know, if you go, my partner Richard Tice's constituency in Boston and Skegness, which is absolutely full of Eastern European immigrants who are, I'm hesitating to say they're illegal because they're not illegal. Most of them have actually found ways to play the system. How do I know this? Because I've seen the offices that are set up in the constituency designed to actually show new arrivals how they can actually be here and remain here legally and extract as much as possible from the system. And what do the most popular businesses often seem to be the ones where you can do the money transfers. That's money being transferred from the UK out to other countries. You know, it's like as if our country has become a gigantic charity for the third world and for less well-off countries.
Yeah. And I just, Shabana Mahmood, as I say, just to reiterate, she's not just considering raising this £3,000 bribery money to leave the country. You broke into our country illegally. Here's £3,000. Pretty please, can you go home? She's not just considering increasing that amount. She's considering a big increase to that amount. And every time I read this kind of thing and every time I hear her talk, I just keep thinking of that video that you brought to us that we played on my show in the evening of her 10 years ago standing on the Greek island of Lesbos, handing out food parcels to illegal migrants arriving from the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa. Going, here's your food, here's your food. That's Shabana Mahmood. She ain't going to solve our migrant crisis in a month of Sundays, nor is Labour. Just before you go, talking of Labour, this plot to oust Keir Starmer is gathering pace. Andy Burnham refusing to rule out a coup, but before he can measure up the curtains in Downing Street, he's going to have to get a parliamentary seat, and Clive Lewis, who's got one of the Norwich seats, a Labour MP, is considering handing his seat to Burnham so that his path to power can be paved. 80 MPs now backing Burnham's move. I mean, either way, whether or not it's going to be Andy Burnham, it does really look as if Starmer's days are numbered.
Oh, definitely. So, I mean, Andy Burnham emerged from party conference season supposedly weakened and damaged. But nonetheless, he is an attractive figure, I think, to many Labour activists, to some Labour MPs, as we can clearly see. He has seemed to have done a decent job in Manchester. I'm no expert on that, though the centre of Manchester, frankly, looks as if it leaves a lot to be desired. A lot of the times, an awful lot of homelessness there, which is one of his big campaigns. But, you know, he's an experienced politician and would certainly be a bit more interesting than Keir Starmer, but he's no less left-wing. So let's not imagine that this is going to deliver any kind of solutions to the worst problems that we face at this point. Absolutely not, no. So I think Burnham might be a bit better than Starmer, but ask the people of Manchester. He's a great proponent of everything he's achieved in the north. People of Manchester, ask them what Andy Burnham has achieved for Manchester. Most of them will tell you it's the square root of sod all. But you know, that's a Labour tradition, isn't it, really? So he can come down to Downing Street and achieve the square root of sod all, just like the current incumbent. Isabel, fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.